there are conversations all the time in the black community surrounding black people we feel like want to be white. And I feel like this episode was really just sort of the manifestation of that, literally instead of figuratively, literally making Ruby white instead of figuratively talking about Ruby as if she wants to be white. But I've been peeping this about Ruby for the longest time. If you go back and watch my other reviews of the other episodes, especially in that Holy Ghost episode when Ruby sort of talks down about a lot of Letty's friends and how they're just artists, not really doing anything and not really contributing to the race or trying to be better like you and your art. She really looks down her nose at other black people she feels like aren't respectable. Ruby is really into respectability politics. We see this in the way that she treats Tamara. I mean, also, she treats other black people while she is white. But Tamara, to be exact, she treats Tamara pretty terrible. If you remember who Tamara is the newly hired colored girl, black girl in Marshalls. What up, everybody? It is your boy Jabbar, the Kakashi Cowboy, and welcome back to my channel for another episode, for another installment of Lovecraft Country, another review of Lovecraft Country, episode 5 to be exact. This episode was entitled The Strange Case. I first want to say thank you to everybody for getting me to 192 subscribers, and for the comments and for the likes and all of your commentary under the comment section below. I'm going to do this episode a little bit differently. I know I did the last episode plot point by plot point in chronological order. This episode felt more character based, and the themes around it, really, I saw metamorphosis, and then I also saw self-hatred. And I first want to start with Montrose because essentially it is his sort of coming out episode. There has been little allusions to the fact that he might be gay, or that people, at least, they view him as being gay, that his father viewed him as being gay, as being sweet, I think it was in like episode 1 or something like that, episode 2. And he beat him heavily for it. So at the beginning of this episode, we essentially see Tick beat Montrose to a pulp. He blackened his eye for, killing Yahima. Montrose, after his ass whooping from Tick, goes straight to Sammy's house. And, we see his face all bruised and beaten. And, Sammy doesn't look surprised at all. Sammy actually asks, who did it this time? And so we know that not only has Montrose's father beat him as a child, but also that Montrose has gotten beaten up over the course of his life for possibly being found out as being gay, and by other people in the town. So this is him getting beat up is nothing new. Him feeling pain is nothing new. Him feeling shame is nothing new also. And he sort of goes to Sammy's house to essentially get out his frustration and anger because he has this pent up shame and self-hatred for himself, and he lets out all of that anger on Sammy, and Sammy sort of just lets him, which I really find very interesting, their relationship. I hope it sort of unfolds further. Also, the fact that Montrose feels this sort of self-hatred and shame, also might go towards the reason why he might have been so willing to kill Yahima in the first place. Even though I said in my last video I didn't like this sort of undertone of the sort of like this idea that we're going to deal with black people committing violence against other people of color, but we're not going to deal with the anti-blackness and other groups and other people of color who have committed violence and systemic violence and also been a part of that. But I also feel like this is a nice layering on of that last and final scene of the last episode, where he just out of nowhere, out of the blue, kills Yahima essentially for no reason. I feel like this actually adds a little bit to his character and furthers it a little bit more into my understanding of why he might have did it, because he feels it's self-hatred and shame. It's like Michael K. Williams, like, who would have thought that Michael K. Williams would have come so far as an actor? Like, he really, 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 like, was emoting in the scene. Like, I felt like, he starts to come out of his shell. He goes to the sort of club. This, I'm guessing it's a gay club, and where all of these, sort of gay people are at, people in drag or other. And he's sort of still sulking a little bit. He's still looking, but we start to see his face. We start to see his face sort of, unclench itself, over the course of this, party at this gay club. We sort of it's just sort of nice to see it unfold and his emotions unfold, and him to sort of Sammy takes his hand. Um, in the club, and they start dancing together. At first he's a little hesitant, and then they start dancing together, and then at the end of the scene he's fully embraced himself, and people lift him up, and it's almost like a this scene felt very religious in a way. It felt very oddly religious, with the confetti sort of coming down and sort of raining down on him, almost as if it was like a baptism. And I love the fact that the scene is also all in red lights. It's almost like a sort of unholy baptism in a way, that I thought was really artistic and also poetic. And I really love Michael K. Williams acting in the scene, and the way that he just sort of lets us know with his, facial expressions, because he doesn't say anything this entire episode. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't say anything when Tick beats him. He doesn't scream out when Tick beats him. He does a little grunting, of course, during the sex scene or whatever, but he doesn't say anything then. He doesn't say anything when they're in, Sammy's room, and all of the other drag queens and stuff are around. He doesn't say anything during the club, but we get so much from just his facial expression. Like, I really feel like Michael K. Williams, wow, the acting was phenomenal. I feel like him and also Anjanou Ellis. I'm going to talk about Anjanou Ellis for a moment right now. She wasn't in this episode, but I felt like there are moments with Anjanou Ellis where we get the same thing, where she doesn't have to say any words, and they are acting their asses off. Also, like, Montrose is a really dark and twisted character. I know a lot of people are like Montrose is raggedy and he's all this other stuff. Like, Montrose is like an anti-hero in my opinion. Like, he's being set up as sort of almost like an anti-hero in a way. He's like this dark, twisted soul. He has a very good reason for being dark and twisted, but he has also, sort of redeeming qualities where we can see glimpses of light where, like, he's like really just he's been hardened by, the shame he feels, the self-hatred he feels for himself in terms of being ridiculed and also beaten up for being gay, and also having different interests outside of what is supposed to make you a man. I really enjoy Montrose, personally myself. Now moving on to Ruby. In my opinion, Ruby is essentially being set up as a sellout. In terms of the metamorphosis and self-hatred, we see this. Ruby wants to be a white woman. She enjoys the perks of being a white woman. William gives her the potion that will change her into a white woman. She wakes up and she's, already a white woman. She doesn't really know how she became a white woman, and she's a little shocked at first, but she starts to kind of enjoy it. She constantly is always going back to drinking the potions so that she can enjoy the privilege of white society and white people. She even prefers it over money. Like, she feels like, this is better than money. She tells William this, in the episode, that, being white is more powerful than any money or cash that you could ever give me, which, I don't know. She's really being set up as the sellout. She is, of course, going to be as a sellout who is going to assist in, Christina's white supremacist grand plan. There are conversations all the time in the black community surrounding black people we feel like want to be white. And I feel like this episode was really just sort of the manifestation of that, literally instead of figuratively, literally making Ruby white instead of figuratively talking about Ruby as if she wants to be white. But I've been peeping this about Ruby for the longest time. If you go back and watch my other reviews of the other episodes, especially in that Holy Ghost episode when Ruby sort of talks down about a lot of Letty's friends and how they're just artists not really doing anything and not really contributing to the race or trying to be better, like you and your art. She really looks down her nose at other black people she feels like aren't respectable. Ruby is really into respectability politics. We see this in the way that she treats Tamara. And also, she treats other black people while she is white, but Tamara, to be exact, she treats Tamara pretty terrible. If you remember who Tamara is the newly hired colored girl, black girl in Marshalls. Ruby, when she gets her, her white skin on, she goes and tries to see why Tamara might have gotten the job over her, and she finds out that Tamara doesn't have a very good education. She didn't take classes. She didn't do all the stuff that Ruby did to be prepared or qualified. And Ruby, from that point on, just starts like dogging her out from the moment, as this white woman, she starts dogging her out and treating her badly. I really found these scenes to be highly uncomfortable, but also very true to how black people in positions of power. If you've ever worked with a black boss who seem to really like who seem to really like enjoy the company of their white peers. They got like a management position or a supervisor position, which is as far as they went. They really enjoyed like like ha ha and he he with the other their other white peers, the other white managers. And but then they treated the black workers under them very badly in order to gain favor with the white managers and other white employees as well. I feel like I've witnessed that personally myself. I know other black people have witnessed that, and that's what Ruby sort of signified to me in this moment. One of those black people that they're really just trying to climb the social ladder. They really don't give a fuck about the race. They really don't give a fuck about anybody else but themselves, because they feel like, yeah, you can treat those other black people. They deserve to get treated badly. But see, I don't, because I'm a respectable black person, and I've actually done something with my life, and I've gotten all these accomplishments. I've become well educated. I've done this and I've done this work and I've done this. I've done everything in my power to become as respectable as possible, to make myself as aligned with whiteness as possible. And so therefore I feel like I deserve, to be in the in crowd of whiteness. And you can treat these other niggers badly, but don't treat me badly because I'm a good nigger. After meeting with Tamara as this white woman, she goes and she talks shit about Tamara to these white ladies who are talking about jungle fever and safaris and monkeys and all this other stuff. And Ruby doesn't really give a fuck until they start dogging out and including people like her with her credentials. So when Ruby as this white woman is talking about how Tamara is sort of a disgrace to her race because she didn't really work hard to get this position, they essentially allude to the fact that there's the whole race of black people isn't well educated. They're good for nothing niggers. And she sort of gets this she sort of gets this stink face on because she doesn't think she's a no good nigger. I'm one of the good, and remember, she's one of the good niggers now. Tamara, we just need to focus on Tamara. Tamara's a bad nigger. Ruby is really, really a terrible fucking person. But I felt like the episode was always setting her up to be that. So we see the self-hatred in Ruby as well as we saw the self-hatred with Montrose. Montrose comes into, a metamorphosis of the acceptance of his gayness, but Ruby goes through a metamorphosis literally instead of figuratively in wanting to actually be white and be actually becoming a white woman. I actually like the way that these scenes are done where we see her switching back and forth between white and black, or we see her switching out of whiteness back into blackness, that it is almost like this very violent and painful process. We see it almost like unwrap her like a cocoon. And I actually think that William explains in the beginning of the scene that they studied under Winthrop, who was doing all of these experiments, and how he sort of related this idea of metamorphosis and transformation into like butterflies and moths, and how they would wrap themselves in cocoons and then sort of break out. And we see sort of the opposite effect happening. So where a butterfly was from a caterpillar then break out from their shell into a beautiful butterfly, we see Ruby, it's almost like the opposite for Ruby. Like she breaks out into a black woman, and she always wants to go back into the cocoon though. It's almost like represent whiteness is safety, whiteness is security, whiteness is protection, also whiteness is just all those things fall under privilege, and because those are things that Ruby doesn't have, and so we see also not only her sort of enjoying it with, enjoying sort of, she puts Tamra in very compromising positions that I really found uncomfortable as well. Like I just felt like Ruby should have had some type of, sympathy or empathy with Tamara in some type of way, and she doesn't at all. Like she is completely into her newfound white identity, and she essentially, puts Tamara always in these compromising positions. When she's around her, talking to her in the store, she, forces Tamara to take them, take all of her and her white coworkers who have just been talking shit about her and all these racist ass comments about her in the back room. She forces Tamara to take them to the south side where the black people are, where the white woman called them, I would love to go on a safari. And we also see in this moment, that white people, yes, they're racist. Yes, they look down on black people, but there's almost like this fetishization of black people as well. We see the way in which the white women are looking at the black men like, ooh, like jungle fever or some shit, like, oh, jungle fever. And like she really like I really don't like Ruby at all at this point, because first of all, how do you force Tamara in an uncomfortable position, to be, in a relationship with her white coworkers who are very racially violent in their rhetoric and in their behavior? Because we also come to find out that the manager of Marshall's, the white manager, is, he hired her to essentially because he was attracted to her and because he wanted to sexually assault her and sexually abuse her and possibly has even raped her. And so, Ruby forces her into these very compromising positions. She makes her take these white people to this club, this black club on the south side, and they start dancing. The white woman, to see the white woman start dancing with the black men and all this other stuff. And it's just very, like, these women could easily yell rape at any moment. Like, these women they have these very, primal and like animalistic, ideas about black people. And if, like, I was just thinking to myself, if one of those black men touches that white woman the wrong way, it's like a rape case. It's a rape case. And she's putting not only these black people, she's almost like Ruby, like, helps these white people invade, a black space, a black safe space. And I really didn't like it. But it also just goes to Ruby's trash behavior. It was also very telling that, when Ruby first becomes a white woman, she runs into this black boy, this little young black kid, and, the white police officers, she's kind of looking disheveled and kind of frantic and in fear. She runs into this black boy and the police officers are there and they're like, "What did you do, boy? What did you do? Are you harassing this white woman? Are you trying to rape this white woman?" And, Ruby, you think that she would, as a white woman, she would be like, no, leave him. Like, you think you would jump into, like, leave this little boy alone. She doesn't. She sort of waits until the very last moment before they're about to pummel this boy to death to be like, it's almost like she's enjoying the fact that, they think that she is somebody to be desired and somebody to be protected and somebody that needs safety. And she even, confesses this to William later on, that after she sort of makes it back to the house, the police officers give her a ride back to the house, back to William's house, and she sort of says, I've never had anybody, care for me or want to protect me and, care for my safety in the way that those police officers did. But she was so sort of infatuated with the idea that she was willing to almost let this black boy get pummeled to death. Like, it just doesn't, like, I get the point trying to be made. They're trying to make the point that Ruby, and other black women, they don't feel a sense of safety because they are black and they are women, the intersectionality of being a black and being a woman. But at the same time, Ruby's selfishness and Ruby's infatuation with the fact that she deserves to be protected over other black people over this black boy who's going to be essentially killed by these two cops. They're getting ready to kill this boy. It's like she's so into herself and what she wants that she really doesn't care about the race at all. I'm actually now going to get into the bad of this episode. I really did not like the fact that when Ruby was walking around as this white woman, you start playing Intozake Shange's for colored girls who have considered suicide when the rainbow is enough. And I really, wind chimes start, we get sounds of wind chimes and nature and birds singing. Like Intozake Shange's for colored girls who have considered suicide, that poem is almost that's sacred text in our community, and it's really special. And the fact that it was used as this white woman is walking around. Like, I don't really care. Like, people can leave in the comments below all they want to, like, what they thought that was supposed to symbolize or what they thought that was supposed to mean. I don't think that, that poem is meant for any white woman or white actress, walking out on screen. Like, I just don't feel like that poem should ever be in context or juxtaposed to any white person. I don't care if technically, Ruby was technically, I guess, if you go along with the story, supposed to be, inside that white woman. It doesn't matter to me. I also felt like a lot of things being done in this episode were for shock value. That moment where, Intozake Shange's for color girls who have considered suicide playing while this white woman is walking around and experiencing, her whiteness and her privilege was supposed to be Ruby. I felt like that was for shock value. I also felt like a lot of other things were for shock value as well, especially the ending. Ruby takes her stiletto off and sort of hits the white manager in the asshole, continues to sodomize him with her stiletto heel. I felt like that was also for shock value. It wasn't necessary nor needed. Like, okay, sure, this might be like a good feel-good moment in terms of, seeing him, previously sexually assault this black woman to now see a black woman sexually assault this white man. But did Ruby really do that for Tamara, or did she do that for herself because that white manager didn't hire her beforehand? Like, I feel like Ruby is like she's very self-serving, and so I find it hard like to believe like the way they're trying to frame it at the end as if she does care for black people somewhat. Like, if she cared for black people, she wouldn't have put Tamara in those positions in the first place. She wouldn't have put Tamara in those compromising positions at all. And I really felt like that ending was just for shock value. It was a purposeful, intentional move on the behalf of the directors and the showrunner and Misha Green to sort of slow down the story a little bit. Like, we've gotten 4 episodes jam-packed full of information and almost like pieces to a puzzle. And this episode, it felt very slowed down. It felt like we weren't getting as much, we were getting some answers. We were getting more answers. We were getting answers to questions that we had already been having. One of the answers that we got was that, in fact, Christina is William, as people have been saying all along. I really didn't like the soundtrack as well. The soundtracks were too contemporary. We had Cardi B. Somebody really must, on this episode right here, must have really been like a Cardi B fan or something like that, because they kept playing Cardi B. They played Cardi B Money. Then they played when she was walking into Marshall's. Then they played Cardi B Bloody. These are bloody shoes or whatever. These are red bottoms. These are bloody shoes. When Ruby was sodomizing the white man in the back office, like, and also which made that scene also, not only was that scene for shock value, but also just made that scene kind of corny, and it wasn't really funny at all. Like, I felt like it was supposed to be funny and we were supposed to kind of laugh, but it just sort of felt corny to me. It didn't feel like, what is the purpose of this? Like, what does this add to the story any? What is this for? It just felt like filler, shock value, and it felt like it was done for no reason. I'm not really liking the contemporary music. I think they need to, I don't know, the contemporary music is really taking me out of the time period that we're in. And it's also making, when they put these very on the nose songs with pairing it with these very on the nose scenes, like these are bloody shoes, and literally the scene is bloody because she's sodomizing the man with her heel. Like, it's just very on the nose. It just makes it kind of corny. I don't particularly like it. Ruby's like, what's the catch for me getting this opportunity to be a white woman? And William tells her that, William, as we know it, at that point tells her that she has to go do something for Christina, his boss, Mrs. Braithwaite. And the thing that she has to go do is she has to go put this stone or talisman or tablet in the pocket of the one of the police chief. When Ruby had to go and like put on that maid uniform and go serve these white people after being a white woman, I felt like that was like, yes, yes, you get. It was like a very tiny like morsel of just desserts. Like, you deserve this because you've been parading around as this white woman treating niggas terribly. Like, you deserve this little bit of shame right now. And I didn't even feel bad for Ruby one bit in that moment when she had to go and serve those white people, and she's looking all like, damn, I was just enjoying life being a privileged white woman. Now I'm back to being a nigger. She puts the talisman in his pocket. She wants him to put the talisman in his pocket because Christina has devised this whole plan to try to overthrow and take the police chief's lodge. So back if you remember back when Montrose, made the mistake of letting it slip that there are 34 lodges or 34 different sections or 34 or 35 different sections of the Ancient Order of the Dawn, and that Christina essentially helped destroy her own Ancient Order of the Dawn, and now she seems to want to take over the police chiefs, his order and his lodge of the Ancient Order of the Dawn, and so she has Ruby go and put this talisman with these symbols we've been seeing for a minute now. We've been seeing these symbols. It kind of looks like an eye a little bit. I don't know if it looks like something else to anybody else, but let me know in the comment section below. But it looks like an eye to me. We've been seeing them all throughout the series. And she has her go and put it in the police chief's pocket. She, of course, is about to get caught because they're coming in. And she actually hears, somebody in the closet behind the coat. The coat is hanging on the closet. And she hears somebody, like, in the back of the closet. And she opens it up. And there's this white man standing in there. He's sort of, like, hooked up. And he sort of has, I don't know, it seems very weirdly, like, I don't want to say is it BDSM or where they sort of do the like pain punishment stuff sexually. He seems like it seems like a very violent BDSM or something like that, and he is sort of chained in there and locked in there. And he can't speak. I think his mouth is gagged or whatever, and he's sort of chained in there. And Ruby has to hide in there with him as she watches the police chief and these other men sort of talk about Christina and what she might be up to and what she's doing here and how they're going to get rid of her. We also see the police chief take off his shirt and his jacket and change into some other clothes, and we can see that he has he has black skin on. He has black fucking skin on his fucking self, and it's like stapled into himself. And so we see that like he also, because remember he was also a part of the whole Winthrop experimentation thing. I assumed that he was just providing Winthrop with black people to experiment on, but he was also a part of, apparently, if we can see the black skin, he has a whole like black bodysuit on his chest and on his back and on his arms as well. And we can also see sort of this idea that he was also a part of the experimentation, and Christina also makes this very interesting comment at the end where she says Ruby is telling her to cut the bullshit. Like, I know you're up to some shit, I know you're up to something, I don't really care as long as I get mine, because that's just who Ruby is. Like, Ruby doesn't give a fuck as long as she's getting hers. So she is the sellout in this scene, and she's being set up as the sellout. And Christina says something very interesting. She says, listen, we've always wanted to be, you want to be us, we want to be you. Let's just cut the bullshit. Let's just tell the truth. We always wanted to be you, and you've always wanted to be us for different reasons. And I found that very interesting, and I related, seeing the police officer, have black skin on himself. Like, this police officer is very fucking racist. Like, he doesn't like niggers at all. Like, he doesn't like niggas at all. We see him, sort of use the same tactics that they used on Freddie Gray on Letty. And, he talks down, calls Letty a monkey and all this other stuff. But you have whole black skin on your fucking self, sir. You have whole black skin. You became a part of an experiment project so that you could have black skin. Like, it's just so weird and so strange. But race in America is very weird and very strange like that. Like, while white people look down their nose at black people, they kind of want to be, they kind of are a little bit like, they fetishize blackness and what it is and what it can do, and like this idea of rhythm. We see this fetishization of rhythm, this idea of black skin, this idea of blackness. Like, we just see, like, there's this fetishization that also comes with racism as well, that is very strange and very odd. And it also goes, I feel like that also goes into the idea, the police chief also seeing him have black skin goes into metamorphosis as well. This idea that they're trying to transform themselves. Christina's trying to transform herself into a white man. She wants to have, she considers the next step up to be a white man and have that power. And also there is this weird relation to magic and also privilege and white privilege that I think is going on as well, where essentially, Christina's trying to convince, Ruby to be on her side, and she essentially is saying, like, I don't give a fuck about none of this shit. I want power. I want magic. And then we also see the juxtaposition of that is that white privilege is kind of also in the same, to Ruby anyway, is in the same realm of being that as well. Like, whiteness is the ceiling for Ruby. Like, the farthest she can go is whiteness, but the farthest that, Christina's looking to go is like, I want magic. I want power over and dominion over everybody magically, and Ruby's like, I think power and dominion over people is whiteness. That's my bar. That's what I think is magic. And so I find that very interesting to be also an interesting underlying aspect of this episode as well. Tick and Letty's relationship and also their characters are very minimized. They have very minimal scenes. They sort of go in and out, juxtaposed to Ruby and juxtaposed to Montrose. We really don't focus on them as much. But, they sort of, we see that Letty kind of fears Tick a little bit. Tick has some anger issues, and I think also some PTSD that he's not dealing with from the war. That I think we're gonna get into in the next episode next Sunday. When we watch it, because that episode, the trailer for that episode came out, and essentially it is about him and this sort of Korean woman sort of falling in love when he's in the Korean War. And, we see, Letty really is fearful of Tick after he just sort of goes on this rage and rampage towards Montrose and sort of tries to beat him to death. Tick sees Letty holding him back and he decides to just walk off and march off. And she even, relays to him Letty even relays to him the fact that, she's scared of Tick sometimes. And I also feel like, I said this before in another episode, I feel like Letty is afraid or scared somewhat of men. Like, she hasn't had a good experience with men. I got this when she was in the house and she was sort of imagining Tick, the spell was put on her, and she was sort of imagining Tick sort of sexually assaulting her, that she has some fears about men, and this is also related to her mother, and how her mother would always have men coming in and out of the house at all times. And so we see sort of Letty, shaking with the bat, like she's kind of fearful. And she relays to him, I'm scared of you a little bit. You scare me because when you get angry, like you just go on this like this rampage. And he of course apologizes and says sorry. Also lets her know that, because Letty isn't thinking that Montrose killed Yahima. She just thinks that, Montrose let Yahima go. And Tick just sort of relates to her, no, he didn't let her go. She got let go all right, but it wasn't in the way that you thought it was. Montrose ended up, burning burning the book and the scrolls. Tick spends most of this episode looking through Letty's photos of the pictures that she took of the scrolls. End of the episode, Tick ends up decoding some of the words, and one of the words spells die, D-I-E. That's the acronym or whatever. And then he ends up making a phone call. And it sounds like the Asian woman, the Korean woman that he's sort of been, dreaming about, that he dreamed about in the first episode, that we sort of meet in the second episode, where they're in the house and he's sort of imagining her come back to life and also trying to kill him. And so we hear them talking on the phone, and he's like, how did you know? And she's just like, I told you, or something like that, or something to the effect of that. So it seems like next episode we're going to get more of Tick's relationship to this Korean woman who he possibly loved or fell in love with beforehand. How that is also going to, I feel like they're going to sort of try to make this into sort of like a love triangle a little bit. If this Korean woman is actually still alive, I don't know. I have a little bit of feeling. I don't know. It seems very, her character seems very still mysterious. So I don't know if she's alive or not. It would seem that she would be. Maybe that isn't even the same Korean woman that we've been hearing, that we've been seeing. Maybe that's somebody else. Who knows? But I feel like they're gonna try to turn this into a love triangle, which I don't know how I feel about that. Hopefully, it doesn't turn into something corny. Hopefully, it's a little bit more deeper than just like this petty love triangle that they have going on. But I'm interested in seeing how this Korean woman plays into the broader story. I'm also surprised that we haven't gotten to Tick's backstory sooner. I feel like we should have gotten to Tick's backstory. I feel like that's also why Tick has been so frustrating as a character to connect to, because we don't really know anything about him. We don't really know, he's our main character and our main protagonist, but we don't really know much about him and what he's gone through and what he's been through. And so finally it seems like we're going to get into it with the introduction of this new character, with this Korean Asian woman, which I'm interested in seeing next episode. Let me know what you guys thought in the comment section below. Also, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Thank you so much again for the subscribers that you have provided me with so far. And I will see you all next time for the next video.